I know the title of the video seems a little bit strange. Y'all probably didn't know that I was a beekeeper. But what happened one day while beekeeping is very relevant to hog hunting, and the reason why I talk about safety so much in my videos, talk about property lines, talk about, potential for houses and people being downrange, not wanting to shoot over hilltops, and things like that. So gun safety is always important. You need to know your target, you need to know the backstop and what's beyond the backstop. And here you see an incident that happened with Daniel and Brazos Valley Boars. They were hunting a property. They spied hogs out behind the landowner's house. They were going to go after the hogs, but before doing so, they noticed there were poachers on the property, and the poachers are off to the side that you see right there. Now, fortunately, nobody was hurt in Daniel's incident, but the poachers were completely unexpected, and that is something that you don't want to have happen in the field. You don't want to find out that you were shooting in a direction and there was something unexpected downrange. And that will happen if you do not do your due diligence and if you are not being safe. And that's what happened to me while beekeeping one day. So aside from hog hunting, I'm also a beekeeper, along with my wife Michelle, who is the brains of our operation. We've been doing this for several years now. We have a little property of about 7 acres outside of the DFW Metroplex area. And this is something we really enjoy doing. At the time of the incident, we were about 3 years into beekeeping. We'd even planted a lot of plants on the properties for the bees. We'd gotten involved with the local bee club and had taken people out to see the bees that had never had experience with bees before. We actually became mentors for a lot of new beekeepers, bringing them out, teaching them what to look for when they're looking in their hives, how to do proper maintenance on the hives, etc. Well, part of that maintenance involves me going out and mowing. And mowing is not one of my favorite endeavors. I have to do it in a bee suit because sometimes the bees can get spicy. As you can see my wife working this hive, I believe at this point when this video was taken, I'd been stung a couple times, and so I'm off in the distance just taking video of her working the hive. So when I'm out mowing, I wear a bee suit because the bees don't always like the lawnmower. Sometimes the bees don't seem too bothered by it. Sometimes they follow me like a cloud as I'm walking around.
Alright, well, I finished mowing. I'm just cooling off, waiting for the bees to calm down, and then I'm going to load up the truck and head home.
This was back in 2021. I'd finished mowing for the most part. But before I'd started mowing, I'd fed the bees. When we harvest honey, sometimes we will go ahead and feed them afterwards if they are short of resources. And so I'm checking to make sure that the feeders are working properly. When this happened, where we are, it is not unusual to hear gunshots on the weekends. It is a rural property, and people do shoot, and that's fine. I'm good with that. But the shots sounded like they came from a different direction. And as I had my hearing protection on, I didn't realize how close the shot had come to me. I heard more shots. They were coming from the north, so I went to check out the guys, and originally they were all facing off to the left, to the west, and I figured that's where their targets were. And then watch what goes on right here.
Oh shit, oh shit. Fuck!
At this point, I've sought shelter behind my truck, and I'm on the phone with 911, hence the video recording stops. As they unload about 3 more magazines in my direction with more bullets whizzing by me in the truck in the process, I was completely terrified at this point that I was going to die. There was a break in the shooting. I managed to get to the other side of my property and waited for a deputy to arrive. So how did this fiasco happen? Well, these 3 idiots are guests of the landowner. They had a new gun. They set up targets on the fence line because they didn't think anybody was on my property. And they were using my property as a backstop. And so they just thought they would shoot into my property. Never mind that my neighbor has plenty of land to be shooting on in the first place, but they're shooting onto my property. And of course, this is the last thing that I saw before I took off running. It looks like the guy was pointing the rifle at me. And this is just amazing to me. I don't know how else to say it. They claim they didn't know anybody was on the property, and yet I'd been mowing for the previous hour in my white bee suit. I look like the frickin' Michelin Man walking around pushing a mower. The mower makes noise. How they didn't know I was there is completely beyond me, but they claim they didn't know I was there. But, the bullets they don't care. Now, as the guy being downrange of those bullets, I care a whole bunch. Now, some of y'all are probably saying to yourselves, well, this was obviously an accident. And it was an accident, but only in the sense of they were not trying to kill me. They were, however, very intentionally and by their own admission to the investigator, shooting onto my property. Now, in Texas, it is illegal to shoot across property lines like they were doing. They didn't care about that. Eventually, all three were charged with deadly conduct. All three ended up getting probation as first-time offenders. And eventually, their records will be clean after their probation period if they get through that just fine. And they'll be able to go on and live their happy lives. And hopefully, they will never do this sort of thing ever again. However, this never would have been an issue if not for their negligence. And that shouldn't happen. And that's why I talk about safety so often in my videos, is because you are responsible for all the bullets you put down range. And if those bullets harm something or threaten somebody, there are consequences for those actions, as happened to these guys. You know, it's kind of funny. More than 2 decades ago, I got into self-defense shooting, bought my own land so that I'd have a safe place to practice. And then hogs invaded my land, and I became a hog hunter. But safety and security have always been a part of hog hunting for me. And as naive as it may sound, as a person who is interested in self-defense, I always thought the bee yard was one of the places where I was most safe because so many people are just deathly afraid of bees. Little did I know that I would have a ballistic threat coming from a nearby property. So no hunter wants to end up with the consequences of doing something stupid like these guys, right? And that's why in my videos, when I'm with other hunters, you'll hear us when we get set up on some hogs, we'll be discussing what are the safe directions of fire, what are not the safe directions of fire, what we need to be aware of, where there's livestock, where there isn't livestock, etc., because we don't want to have any unfortunate incidents that get us into trouble or cause any harm. We work very hard to make sure that we don't do things like shooting across property lines where there may be houses, people, or livestock and equipment that could be endangered. Again, thanks to my buddy Daniel at Brazos Valley Boars and his crew for loaning me this video. Do check out his channel. He's got a lot of neat stuff on it. I think you'll enjoy it. Carpe sus, my friends.